So, welcome everyone. My name is Tutur. I will be the facilitator of today's webinar. And basically, my role is just here to hold the space. Also, Tuulia and Kasha will be the speakers, and they will introduce themselves later. And basically, I want to say you can always write to me in the chat or use the chat if you have like any kind of technical problems or there's something you didn't understand, and then I will catch it up and try to maybe answer your question. Um, like um, yeah, the webinar will be like kind of in two main parts. The first part, like I and Tulia and Kasha will be speaking, and there will be time for questions afterwards. And usually the time for question is quite short, and this time I will try to see and stretch it a little bit out. But you have to know that, yes, in the first part when we're talking, usually I don't invite you to I invite you to kind of keep your questions for yourself and only share them with us directly when it's the moment for the questions. You can simply raise your hand, open your mic, and speak up. And because we have short time and this webinar will be only 1 hour, so ending at 7, then I also invite you to have your question really being straight and quick. So maybe if you think about a whole complex situation that you can keep it like kind of to the essential part of it. And for those of you who can, I invite you also to open your camera. It's nice for just the feeling of seeing each other. Yeah, have a lot of pleasure looking at faces I already know. And the webinar will be also recorded. And I think usually it only record the people who are speaking. So if you're not speaking, I don't think it will record you. And we'll try to just end on time at 7. So I think that's it. Um, I said to the people who joined earlier that you can right now share in the chat just your name, where you attending from, and what you notice in your body. And right now, I notice I'm yeah stressed, excited, and a bit warm also in my chest. So just to give a bit of context, this webinar is part of a broader series of webinar that we're organizing with Honesty Europe. Tuulia is always here, and then every time I try to have a different speaker, and today we have Kasha, and Kasha will introduce herself later. And the topic of today is boundaries. And I really like the name we've came up with, like unfuck your boundaries. And I just want to share a bit, like for me, this topic has been really important in my life. I remember a couple of years ago, I was leading a group and proposing stuff, and people were saying kind of yes or like not saying much. And later on, I discovered that the people really didn't like what I proposed, that they completely crossed their own boundaries and they were really angry. And eventually, they decided to kick me out of this group, saying that I really crossed their boundaries so many times. And that was really intense for me. And it really took me a long time to understand that it's not my whole responsibility, but people are responsible for their own boundaries. And that I sometimes could not know that I was crossing people's boundary, or that if they didn't say anything, it means rather no. And yeah, and now today I still like somehow don't trust people fully with like their boundaries, especially like because I work in a lot of activist communities where it's a lot about also hearing the victims, and people are saying a lot like you crossed my boundaries and you were an aggressor and stuff. And sometimes it's a bit unclear whether actually it is fair to the people who are being accused, because like this thing of boundaries sometimes gets a bit blurry with like which boundaries has been set and which boundaries more like something we all assume. Um, yeah, and also this topic for me was a lot inspired by the discussion I had with Kasha. Recently, I've been in her training, and we had like a really interesting topic about like this thing that boundaries, aside from the physical boundaries, more like a story. And then what do we do out of that? So I don't want to talk much more about this. And yeah, I would like maybe you, Kasha, to introduce yourself first very quickly, and then Tuulia.
Okay, thank you, tutor. I am Katarzyna Mitschke. I'm from Poland and I'm a radical honesty trainer. I was trained by Tuulia, so she's my teacher and my friend. Um, yes, actually, a lot of things that you shared, tutor, resonated with me. For me, I think I still do, but more in the past. I was really worried about crossing other people's boundaries. And I think it like I was very anxious about it and constantly checking in with people. And not so long ago, I realized that what I actually do is I don't really check in with myself where my boundaries are. So of course, I don't trust others that they will do it when I'm not doing it. So the topic of boundaries is kind of like really crucial for me in creating the relationships where I can just relax into a connection, when I can actually trust the person I'm talking to, that if I am myself and if I speak openly about what I want and what I don't want, they will do it too, or we will in some other way be able to communicate about it. So for me, it's mostly about finding more trust and ease in relationship, this whole boundary work. And yeah, I imagine I will talk more later. And I'm curious to hear from Tuulia.
Yeah, thanks for doing this webinar with me, Kasia, and thanks for hosting Tutur. I'm Tuulia. I'm from Finland. I'm actually currently here in the woods. I've been mushroom picking most of the day, and it's raining, so I'm a bit like, ooh, I hope the connection will stay, because a few times the lights were flickering, but I have a mobile in case I freeze. Um, I'm a radical honesty trainer, and I've been leading workshops for about 9 years now. Retreats and workshops, I do that for a living, and I'm also a therapist, so doing one-on-one work with individuals and couples. And why this topic is close to me is that I'm a recovering people pleaser. So the question, what would be okay for me, was just not in the forefront at all. It was like, yes, 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 whatever you want, that's cool. And I didn't at all used to check in like what is not okay for me, what I'm not willing to do for the other, or what is not okay for them to do to me, like both like services and also in a more like intimate physical context. So nowadays, I really find a lot of value of slowing down, checking in. What is a true yes for me? What is a no? Or do I need more time to check in? And then getting to a yes that really feels good, feels right. So that's like my personal perspective where I'm coming from to this.
Yeah. Great. I like that there's already so much stuff coming up with like this taking some time for checking in and like kind of getting away from the people pleaser patterns. Like I imagine we can come back a bit to that later. So basically for like the main part of the talk, I had a bit divided the talk in like three parts. First, I want to talk about like what are boundaries in general, what do they mean, what purpose do they serve. Then I believe I'm going to ask you some questions about like the challenges. Why do we have this webinar? Why is it a problem that sometimes we cannot express our boundaries, or sometimes we have to assume other people's boundaries? And then I want to move on at the end to the very practical stuff. What can everybody do to practice expressing, listening to other people's boundaries and create eventually a better, safer, more daring intimacy? And then after that, there will be the space for questions. So I invite all of you again to just save your question for yourself. And when it comes to the right timing, you have space for that. So first, Kasha and Tuulia, and I kind of leave it to you to decide who wants to speak first. Would you be willing to share like what for you are boundaries, and it can be like what purpose, function do they serve? Why do we even have boundaries at the first place? And maybe give some examples of what are boundaries that you have in your life or in other people's life.
Yeah, Tuulia, will you start? I worry I will complicate it, so I want you to start. I imagine you have a clear message.
Okay, I hope so. Let's see.
Let's see. Yeah.
I would kind of keep it simple. Like it's about what is okay for me and what is okay for you, and what is not okay for either of us. And of course, it's up to me to tell what is okay for me and what is not. So it's not about somebody needing to be a mind reader, but me noticing and then communicating. Or maybe there's some, like most of them are flexible and change. Also, if I'm getting to know somebody more or I'm in a different mood or different place, then the boundary can be a bit different and they can be physical. So that's kind of maybe more clear. And then different things around verbal topics as well. For example, what comes to me recently, we had a retreat and we were in the sauna, and then we had a person from the Middle East, and we were talking about the war situation, and then some other people say that, oh, they don't want to have politics in the sauna. So that was like a clear expression, and then a request, hey, are you willing to leave politics out of the sauna? And then I had the option and the other person like saying yes and go with it, or say, no, we're not willing to do that. And then the person could request again or maybe leave the situation. So it's not that it's something that every time somebody needs to say yes to. And it's something that I think is important to clearly communicate, and then the other one to, of course, consider and receive. Yeah, that's already quite a lot. And then the physical boundary, like I meet a new person, I check with them, are you shaking hands? Do you want to hug or something else? Rather than just go, which sometimes would be like natural for me just to go for a hug. I don't know. Maybe it's not okay for some people. And some people say, no, yeah, we don't know each other, or I'm not a hugger or something else. So rather than assuming that I know what might be okay for them, asking, and then they can communicate to me. But if they say yes to a hug and then they don't feel good, then it's on them, kind of, if they didn't tell me.
Yeah, thank you so much. So when we were preparing this webinar, and I looked at the question, what is a boundary? I think it was the first time ever when I actually made effort to define it for myself. And for me, it's like, it's basically the information that comes from both my body and my mind that tells me about how I want to be and not be with someone else. So boundary like is present when there is some contact between me and the outside world happening. And that is also very like important point in the Gestalt psychotherapy, which I'm studying, that they say that like boundary is where you meet other people. And I think the most kind of like eye-opening thing I've heard about boundaries was when I was reading Jesper Juul, who is like, was, because he's dead, like a Danish family therapist. And he spoke about that this saying that children need boundaries. Like, I don't know if you've heard about it, but many people, it's used like when thinking about raising children. So children need boundaries. And some people understand it as if like, here is an adult and here is a child. The adult needs to kind of draw the boundaries like around a child. So that would be like the more traditional understanding of the boundary. And Jesper Juul says, no, you have your personal boundaries. So of course, your child needs to know where your boundaries are. So your child needs to know where you stand, who are you, what is okay for you, and what is not, because knowing this gives them safety, and knowing this gives them a sense of who you are. And this shift, like really kind of, I have goosebumps right now, like thinking about boundaries is something very personal that defines who we are, and that if we communicate it, other people actually get to know us. This is very exciting for me. So I guess this is how I see the boundaries. And I love that this information comes both from the body and from the mind. So I sense where my boundary is. And then it's my job to kind of like recognize and decide what I want to do about it. How do I communicate it, or how I act upon it.
Yeah, I really like in what you said, Kasia, the part that boundaries provide us and also other people a sense of safety, and at the same time, it's where we meet. It's where like connection is possible. Because I think at least for my on my side, I always saw it kind of more from the perspective of life safety. You know, it's like putting distance or yeah. And I think it's really nice to have clear boundaries, also to be able to like really come onto it and even create like closeness or intimacy. And yeah, you want to say something? Go.
Yeah, I will be short, as I promised. Well, yeah, this meeting on the boundary is exciting for me because, like, for most of my life, I focused on like trying to not to even get close to other people's boundaries, because, like, if I accidentally cross them, they will just abandon me and the connection is over. But if I am so far that I cannot even like get close to the boundary is not there, there is no connection. So if I'm coming closer to the person and we both start to realize where our boundaries are, this is where we kind of like, whenever we interact, there is some kind of boundary. And if we are far away from any kind of boundary, there is no connection really. So I really like this, that connection, like the boundary is part of connection in a way. So,
Yeah.
and this is the part that I worry is complicated, but I'm still gonna talk about it.
Yeah.
And I imagine people can ask for clarity. Yeah.
And maybe like if people want to know more about this,
No.
they will ask questions about that. I want to jump into like the more tricky, also juicy part of it, because like in the ideal world of boundaries and we all express them and we can meet and we can be safe, everything is perfect. And now I want to ask you a bit more like what's difficult about boundaries? What are for you the key topics that we need to bring into really say how much we need to like shift or common understanding about boundaries, or like when does it start to be a bit more difficult to express them, to receive them? Yeah, and I would let you also name like the challenges that you think are present for us. Tuulia, do you
Yeah,
want
I
to start?
think, yeah, yeah. I mean, what I shared earlier, the one thing of noticing, like what is okay for me and what is not. If I don't even notice, if I'm not fully aware what happens in my body, what feels right in my body, what feels like tense and uncomfortable, then of course I cannot even communicate. So first noticing and then communicating, and that's on me. And then of course, because this is a connection, like Kasia said, like then checking in. But then that can be scary too. So there already can go things wrong, like I don't notice, or I notice only later when something already happened, or I'm too busy with myself not to check in with the other, even though I might notice that something wasn't okay with them. So not being kind of in tuned in the connection. And then of course there's a thing like somebody says this is my boundary, and I say, well, I don't agree. I still want to talk about this, for example, or this is really important to me. I want to deal with this conflict. So what do we do then? I want one thing, they want another, and boundary is not, in my opinion, something that somebody can force on me. So then how do we mitigate this? Then it is either agreements, or maybe we have a way of like, okay, let's pause for now. Are you willing to later come to the topic or come back to this fight or conflict? So we find a way that works for both. But sometimes there is not a way that works for both. I'm talking about verbal stuff right now, because I think a physical boundary is kind of more clear. You just don't touch other people when they say no. It's kind of a different remit. So yeah, there is, yeah. So me not being aware, the other one not being aware, or us not agreeing. So at least those are like big chunks that I see.
Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah, I totally agree. What I could add on this is, at least that happened for me many times, and I believe for other people too, some people I worked with, that you actually like recognize your boundary, or like you notice some uneasiness that, or like some that kind of points out to you not wanting something, and then you start to question, like, oh, but do I actually should I be having this reaction? Maybe I'm just overly sensitive, right? So in a way, we get a signal from our body, and then we question, oh, but is it my boundary? Like, this is probably not the explicit self-talk we're having, but I sometimes question my own boundaries because of some beliefs that I have. Like, yeah, like, oh, I should be okay with this situation, for example, right? Or in this context, or I've done it so many times, again, I should be okay. So this kind of questioning, or like, do I have the right to say no? Or will they still want to be with me if I say no? So yeah, so yeah, all kinds of fears and anxiety that come from me wanting to belong, me having a specific set of beliefs about what is a good way to be in the world. This is, I think, tricky. And then even if I know my boundary, I won't communicate it because I'm stuck questioning myself. So that would be one thing. And the other one that is like personally tricky for me as well, and I think it's big, is that there's many societal norms that we kind of, again, what is the word that we kind of swallow them without what,
Internalize.
sorry?
Internalized, said Mike.
Internalized. Thank you very much. Exactly. Thank you. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Tuulia. Yeah, so the societal norms that we just internalize, we assume they are boundaries, right? So like without even checking, like we wouldn't communicate our boundary because, for example, we think it's obvious that strangers shouldn't touch strangers, for example, right? It's obvious that that people I don't know shouldn't touch me. So I'm not saying anything. And instead I just get like, what the fuck did this crazy person do, you know? But actually it's my boundary. I don't want to be touched by someone I don't know. Or maybe I do. But most of the times I don't. But it's like, so this confusion between, I think it boils down to me assuming that other people know what my boundary is. That's what I'm trying to say. That is the tricky point.
Yeah. And Kasia, like kind of what I take from what also both of you share is that it's kind of like there's this big bubble of like beliefs and fears and like sayings about boundaries. So like I should hug people when I meet them for the first time, and maybe it's not okay to say no when we are getting closer with my first partner. We should have sex and something like that. So I imagine we're a bit full of like this knowledge, these beliefs that we take from, I don't know, watching films, hearing our parents, whatever. And then the kind of solution to it is always to come back more, if I hear it correctly, to like the body and listening to herself, whether there is a clear yes or a clear no. And I kind of wanted to dive deeper into like some of the things you said. Tuulia, at some point you said there's a difference between like the physical and the verbal boundaries, and I kind of make it very important that when we're talking about boundaries, we also clear out like whenever we say like, yeah, we don't assume what other people's boundaries are, which I think is one of the key message I see here, but also like whenever it's really not okay to go on some type of boundary. And I kind of want you to explain more what's happening on the physical level, maybe like is there a difference between verbal and physical boundaries?
Well, I think there is. And of course, like we have the whole legal framework, so you don't go grabbing into somebody's ass or something, or, you know, touching people in the metro or something. So that's kind of something we all know that that's not okay. And then there's even a level of illegal activity at some point, or harassment or abuse. And then those more subtle things that then can be cultural. Like when I entered a workplace where there was a Spanish coworker, uh, she was very touchy, and it was quite like unusual for me that from day one somebody was talking to me and touching my body. And yeah, we did talk about it later that for her it was okay and normal, and for me it was unusual. And it wasn't a harsh boundary, but I noticed just this discomfort. So there is like a harsh boundaries, like clear, you don't like sexually touch people, especially if they're not your partner or you have established that kind of thing, or intimately touch. And then kind of other touch as well. What are the places if you just meet somebody, most likely it's not so okay, or at least you need to check first. Or sometimes workplace or power imbalance, boss touching, saying, yeah, you're doing pretty okay job, but you're doing badly here, and then there is a physical touch, and that's kind of inappropriate, most likely. So I would say that we have some more common understanding in the physical remit and what is actually abusive, and then what's most likely not okay. And then, like, when it's close people, we have already established within the family or within friends or with the romantic partner. And then, of course, even there it can change. Like with my partner, there's like an ongoing agreement or consent that we can touch each other without asking first. But then there might be a moment, for example, when we have a fight, I say, I don't want you to touch me right now. And then it's up to me to say, hey, right now it's not the time. We clear this, and then we can be huggy and kissy, but not right now.
Yeah. I think I would like to come back later to this thing of like agreements and maybe how to work a bit more with the question of also physicality. And
may I
but
add something to the body?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So for me, it's also like the boundaries of like the physical boundaries of our bodies are like the most kind of obvious boundaries, right? Like here I am not, and here I am, and something this physical reality of where my body ends. For me, it makes it like very clear that the boundary involving touch is the boundary that I am not crossing. So when a person said, no, I don't want to be touched right now, I take it very seriously, because it's like, it's so personal. Like so I would say that every time there is the body related boundary was expressed and then it's not being respected, to me, it's like, well, abuse is a big word, but it's like very sensitive. Like it's very easy to feel violated when someone crosses this boundary, because it's so very personal. So yeah, I might negotiate with someone about their boundaries related to behaviors, to words, and so on, and I will not negotiate their body boundary. To me, it's like so personal. It's about the integrity. So I'm not crossing that boundary if they say they don't want it.
Yeah. Like kind of I find something in what you say really interesting, because for me it was really not obvious is first that boundaries in general, especially the verbal boundaries, can be negotiated. That if somebody say I don't want that, it's also up to me to say, do I accept it or not? And it feels very alive, because right now I'm working people who are being asked to leave a space or to leave a group on reasons that maybe they just are being a bit unfair. And I have a lot of people around me who are like kind of, yeah, they accept it. They take it like somebody has a boundary, so I will also take it for me. And yeah, I find it interesting that actually, no, I have the right to say, no, it's your boundary and I don't want that, and I want that we negotiate around that. And the second thing I want to talk about a bit more when it comes to the physical aspect of it, I'm going to a training in a couple of weeks, which is about like physical practices. So like kind of we're doing contact dance and like physical sports, stuff like that. And also in my sexual education, I've been taught that somehow when there is not a clear yes, it's a no. So it's kind of a way of saying like if there's not a clear yes, then I have to assume that there is a boundary there. And it brings kind of the whole topic about consent. And I kind of want to hear more because I heard like kind of on a verbal side at least, it's good not to assume that people have boundaries. It's my responsibility if I don't want something to say it. But then on the physical side, there seems to be something different. And Kasha, it was very clear for me that you say when there's a no, it's not mine to renegotiate that. And at the same time, I want to check with you. What is this thing about consent? Because sometimes there's like this, yeah, I guess in my education that I really need to ask, and even not to wait for a no to do something. So I want to check with you, maybe Tuulia, I don't know if you have some thoughts about consent, what it is, and yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
like before even worrying about the exact words of consent and boundary, for me, this is like if I'm in contact with another human, I care how they are doing and how they feel. So as a human, I want to check in, hey, is this okay for you? And if there is already kind of a physical sign, like the example of hugging, they are opening their arms and they're coming towards me. I don't need to necessarily verbally ask, hey, is it okay to hug? Especially if we know each other and we're already both doing that. So there is that kind of either non-verbal consent, or then it's an ongoing agreement when we are close to each other. And then it comes tricky when there is, people I don't know so well, or there's some kind of power situation. Also, this goes people you might know well, for example, parents and children. I don't think we can assume that it's okay to touch our children, even though a lot of parents do all kinds of, or grandparents, all kinds of kissing and touching. So I think that's also, maybe it's not fully answering your question, but I notice now that this point is actually very big for me. How adults might respect each other and check for consent. And then when it comes to kids, all of a sudden we assume that it's okay to pat them into the head and even bath and pinch them in the cheek. How would that be okay? They are also human beings. So I think thinking of this thing of consent, checking in, and respecting other humans, no matter the age, I think it's really vital. So I would bring that to the conversation of consent as well.
Yeah.
And again, it can be also nonverbal, that the kid seems okay with that. And many kids get traumatized, or at least somehow feeling unpleasant stuff within themselves when adults touch them in the way. And I'm not even talking about any sexual abuse, but just all this patting and grabbing and pulling and all this kind of thing that is kind of funny or nice, and it's not.
Yeah, I'm quite moved by what you're sharing, Tuulia. Yeah, I appreciate you for bringing that up. So, on a very practical level, I think that the whole approach to consent and boundaries has been changing nowadays. It's like it is the awareness around boundaries and consent is now very different than it was, I would say, maybe even 5 years ago, definitely 10 years ago. So I think there's like very big differences in the society, like what people know about boundaries and consent, and how they actually, how much did they check with themselves. And I'm saying this because I think, like, so if we are talking about boundaries right here, right now, if we are interested in this topic, like for me personally, it often means that I am the one who takes more responsibility for checking, right? Like, for example, even though I want to live in the world where people take responsibility for the boundaries, and when I interact with my friends or romantic partners or sexual partners, I am kind of like creating my connections based on the shared understanding that we express our boundaries. And if I talk to someone whom I don't know very well, or I'm just starting to get to know them, I often initiate the conversation about the boundaries because I cannot know what their level of awareness is in this topic. And as you said, Tuulia, if I am with another person, I care about them. So I want to know, I'm curious. And so yeah, I often invite this kind of conversation. And yeah, I think that's what I wanted to say. Yeah.
Yeah.
There was something else.
Maybe add to the consent that there is like ongoing consent with close people, and then there's like one-off consent. Is this okay in this very moment? And I think that's also important to establish and maybe go through the agreements that I mentioned. And Lorenzo, I saw your comment about animals, and I agree that we cannot assume that it's okay to a pet or any animal for us to touch and grab and do all those things. And then it might be more tricky terrain if somebody's not attuned because the verbal stuff is not there. There's other kind of communication, and there is communication. So I think, and there is the power imbalance, most likely that we can overpower most animals as humans. And yeah, I hope that we are like aware of our power there, our role.
I know what I wanted to say.
Kasia, I just wanna like close a bit with the practicals and getting to more tools so that later we have a bit more time for questions.
All right. I can fit my thought within the practical tools.
Yeah.
All
so
right.
so do it.
Go ahead. I do it now. Okay. All right. Yeah, I wanted to say that the boundary, and like you can even imagine the boundary on a map, it can be very kind of freaky, you know. It's like there are some boundaries that are like this, but then there's many boundaries that go like freaky and weird. And I think it's the same with our boundaries. And practical thing is I'm just gonna share about like a sexual experience I've had, like when I was okay with like some kind of touch that felt very sexual to someone else, that was like very close to the intercourse, and then I was not okay with the intercourse, and the person was like really kind of shocked even, and that conversation was difficult. But for me, it's like if my boundary about something is here, I am not assuming that it's also the same here and here and here. It can be very different like if the situation changes even a little bit, there is a small shift. My boundary can shift. Like boundaries are very much alive and flexible, I think. So it's really, I like this word that you use, Tuulia, to be attuned to, like to other beings, but also to myself. And this thing about the boundary being like flexible and yeah, just changeable. It's changing. I like it. I think it's important that the boundary is alive. I like that
Yeah.
because I'm alive. Oh, that's deep. That's so deep. Okay. Go
And it
ahead,
is,
Tutor. Shut up.
yeah. I think you're right. This it's really important. I imagine it's part of like the main message that boundaries are changing, and it's not because suddenly we kiss that the moment after we can touch our chest, and the moment after, like, I think it's really part of the key messages here. And I would like you to kind of like very briefly, in like matter of 3 minutes, maybe go over a bit like what do you think are the main tools that people who are joining here or watching the video could like practice with themselves, with their partners, with friends, with whoever. Yeah, and to maybe be very, very like kind of like a couple of them, whatever you think is most important to have.
Yeah, I can kick off with one, and I think you have some other ones, Kasia. So we mentioned about slowing down and noticing your body. So some practical things around physical boundaries that I like is just eye gazing, coming closer. Does this feel right in my body? Maybe taking 2 steps backwards. How does this feel? And then negotiating in silence the proximity. And of course, one can do this with people who are very close, but also people who are not that close, and noticing, like learning to attune, okay, the same word again, attune to my body when it's like already getting a little bit on the edge. And with a safe person, maybe going beyond the edge, like going so close that it's my body tightens. So like learning to really listen to my body's language signals, so that when there's a situation that is not maybe so flowy and easy and safe, then my body reacts, and then and of course it's all about safety. So if my body reacts, I notice it. So I'm there noticing, and sometimes it's enough that I say out loud something, and then I'm able to go closer physically or maybe verbally as well. So this is one, like checking around the proximity, being attuned to the body, playing with the distance.
Yeah, thank you. So I will follow up on that. So yeah, like I think what you're saying about is like developing the sensitivity to the boundaries, kind of really, so again, attuning to oneself. And then I would say that even before we learn how to communicate it, there is the validation. Like I think it's crucial because most of us were not, like our boundaries were not often validated when we were children. So the self, like when I talk to my niece, like from day one, she was like, if she didn't want something, I could tell. Like she would either cry or yell, and now she just says, "Oh, I don't want it." And I say, "Oh, okay, I hear you. You don't want it." And by doing this to her, I learned to do this to myself. Like if I notice I don't want something, I start with being like, "Oh, okay. Ah, here's something I don't want." right? So self-validation, like validating my own boundaries, and then communicating. And it can look differently. Like it can be the I want or I don't want sentence. So I want to stop this conversation right now and get back to it in an hour. Or I don't want you to touch me now. It can be the information for another person. So not even a request. That is also an important part. So it can be like the request, like, oh, I want to stop this conversation now. Can we get back to it later? But it can also be information. I am not taking work calls after 5 p.m. I'm just telling you where it is. And then they can still call. I'm just not taking it. So it's still my response. Like I've communicated it, and it's still my responsibility to follow up on it. And I do still have power, even if someone else does not respect the boundary that I drew, right? So I'm informing them, and then I'm choosing how to act on the violation, or like quote unquote violation. I want you to ask me before you borrow my phone charger, when someone just did it without asking me. Or like, I want you to next time ask me. So those would be like the example of sentences we could say. And I don't know if it fits into the tools, but I think it's very important topic of, what am I doing after I've expressed my boundary and someone does not adjust their behavior. So speaking in a popular way, they cross my boundary. Because of course I can just get very hurt and offended, but that's sometimes not very helpful. So there's other stuff that I can do, which is I make a decision. So I acknowledge what is the situation. I said I didn't want it. They still do it. What do I do about it? Do I want to leave this situation? Do I want to try something else? Do I want to ask someone for help? There is options, but to remember that I still have options after somebody didn't like respect my boundary. That is very important to me.
Maybe like a brief follow-up on what you said, the agreement. So I have made relationship agreements in my relationship, and one of them is we don't talk about heavy stuff after 10 p.m. So that is kind of agreed boundary. We don't do that for a variety of reasons. It's not good for our nervous system. It's not good for the sleep. When we are tired, it's difficult to get over stuff. And still, either of us are able to say, hey, this is still really troubling me. Are you willing to listen? Are you willing to talk? And then either of us can say yes or no. So we can negotiate, but there is a like agreement that we intend to keep. But it's not like so hard set in stone that, oh, you're a bad person if you don't keep like to the T each agreement. But I think it's very helpful in close relationship. Or with my best friend, we agree that we are in that way together that anything can be talked about. So there's no taboos, no like where you need to limit yourself or try to be nice when you're pissed off. That all that is welcome in a connection. So whatever agreements might be for you, but kind of being clear what is okay in this connection and what not. And I assume you want to go to the questions part, Tutur.
Yes, Tuulia, I imagine you saw my message in the chat. Yeah, I think there's a lot more also I'm driven to say, and I will not do, because I would love that maybe for the next like 7-8 minutes. I don't want to spend so much time so that we can finish a bit closer to the time. That there is space for any questions. And so again, my invitation for all of you is just that when you have a question, just open your mic, maybe your camera if you didn't, and you just go and ask your question. And I would very much enjoy if you have it very clear and concise, so not too long, not explaining maybe a whole situation, so that we can try to have a couple of them. So I would leave the floor for anyone who wants to start with a question.
Hello, I would like to start. Do you hear me?
We hear you. Just
barely. I couldn't understand.
You hear me now?
Much better.
Yeah, it's the Bluetooth. I have trouble with emotional boundaries lately, so I wondered if you had any thoughts on that.
Can you say a bit more? What do you mean by emotional boundary?
Like accepting certain behaviors or certain, I don't know how to say, in a relationship. Like what you said at the end, like be clear about what you want, but how do you notice what you want with another person on the emotional side?
Yeah, I think that's, if I understand you right, an important point. How to notice what you want. Again, slowing down, noticing your body. If there's any tightness or tension, maybe it's not okay for you, what's going on. And then one thing we didn't mention is anger is healthy. So we all have this healthy anger that is protecting us. And if there's like, no, I don't like that, then of course there's a message in that anger, and the anger is there for a reason of taking care of us and showing what is okay and what's not. So also that could be one sign when the anger is rising that there's something that is not okay. And I think there's like two levels. One, dealing with it in the moment and talking to the other and saying, if you notice what is okay for you and what not, and then making an agreement like, I don't want you to yell at me, or I want you to give a warning before you raise your voice, or I only want you to express your anger to me after asking if it's okay for me, or only after dinner, or whatever things work for you.
And I want to add that if you notice there is a boundary, or like you think there is a boundary, maybe you're unsure, I think you don't need to know right away what do you want instead of that behavior. So you can just say, I'm not liking this. I don't even know why. And I don't know what I want instead, but this is not okay. This doesn't feel good to me. So I very much want to encourage you and everyone else to like also allow yourself to not know. But if you feel something is not okay, you feel it, and you can just say that. Yeah, it doesn't feel good, and I don't know yet what else I want.
Yeah. And I remember, Kasia, when we were preparing the call, you also spoke about kind of identifying the need behind a boundary or the reason or something. And I kind of connect to that sometimes I can just feel a boundary that's very clear, but kind of the message is it's hard to understand what this is about, and this can take longer. And that's also what I related.
Yeah. And yes, thank you. And one exercise or like kind of like practice that can help with that is if you imagine you talk to a friend or maybe you journal about this kind of like, let's say, problem or challenge that you're having with your boundaries, but without using the word boundary. So you have to describe like, what is this challenge? What is difficult about this situation without using the word boundary? That can actually help to like understand what exactly is going on. Yeah, so yeah, what is the need behind it? What is the fear behind it? Yeah. So you can either ask someone to talk to you about it or you can journal about it. So describe your challenge with the boundary without using the word boundary.
Nice. I'm very aware of the timing, and I think I would like that we end a bit like after time. I want to check with you, Kasia and Tuulia, if it's okay. Maybe we have like another space for like one or two, maybe two other questions, and then we close it. And maybe that would be like 10 minutes after 7. So yeah, anybody
I'm okay
wants?
with that. And I also see the Michaela's question there. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I didn't see yet.
What to do when the person gets upset or angry? I want to say quickly to that, we all get angry, we all get upset. That's part of life. So I think it's fine that they sometimes get angry, especially if there's somebody close to you. Then it's just you sharing still how you feel. Like, yeah, it's still a no. I'm hearing you're upset, you feel hurt, you're angry, you don't like me saying no, and it's still a no. So then there can be further dialogue, like what is really going on for us. So going underneath. So what is behind the angry hurt? Like, oh, I feel abandoned. I feel that you don't care for me. I don't feel important to you. I now start to like blame myself that I'm needy or selfish for something. So then it can go to another level of exploring what is truly going on for us. And what is a lot moving us is, of course, the fear of losing somebody or not being important enough, not being loved, or I'm loving more. So this is just how we are built as humans. We are animals who survive in groups of animals, human animals, and that is kind of moving us a lot, whether we are aware or not. And it's okay to be angry and upset. The main point is we stay present with the other and express and listen, and then we can get to another place.
And I imagine sometimes there is some like it works most of the time, and sometimes there's some grief. Like, okay, so I've said what's important for me. The other person like really doesn't like me saying that, and they don't get over it. I think most of the time, if we stay present, they will get over it eventually. But if they don't, and I still want to prioritize myself, yeah, sometimes it takes time and feeling hurt and sad about it. And there is no fix. No.
Yeah. And it's not the job of the other to fill all of my wishes and needs, or my job to fill somebody else's all wishes and needs. So then, for example, if I want to talk about the 150th time about the death of my father to my partner, and this is 2 years back, maybe he says, okay, it's not the time, it's too much. And then I reach out to friends and do my talking there. Or something smaller, something that is bugging me at work, and I've already talked about it like 72 times. Maybe the other ones just don't want to take it, and then it's up to me to have a self-care system where I can also reach out to other people, or they can reach out to other people if it's about the other.
I want to check if anyone else wants to, like, I think we have time for one last question very quickly.
It's not a question. I just wanted to share that for me, I didn't really see and respect other people's boundaries as long as I didn't respect my own. And it was a quite important understanding for me. And I was really sad when I discovered it, because I was like, shit, I probably crossed other people's boundaries there and there and there. But yeah, very important to me. So I wanted to share this.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you. I can very much relate.
Yeah, it's a good point. Thanks for sharing that, Ondine.
Yeah.
And there's a person asking in the chat, how does radical honesty use its tools to deal with and understand codependence? Because there was the question of like how to keep boundaries when we are codependent somehow. I don't know if you want to bring some insights to that.
Oh, it feels like a big.
Yeah, it's a huge topic. Like codependence as is, like, is it really like real hardcore compulsion, like addiction, or are we talking about some mild behavior? So there's already like the whole variety of things going on. Like everything in this practice starts with awareness and then sharing and verbalizing. I'm afraid you will leave me. I'm afraid that you love me less. I feel anxious when you don't come home when you said you would come. And then just staying present to that again and again. And hopefully having the other one to be willing to listen. And then, of course, there's the whole self-work that one might need to do around this topic. And I would say that no matter how much the other one is there for me and reassuring and validating, it's still my own personal work. Nobody can kind of fill that cup for me. So I need to see, okay, what is there in me that I'm not kind of enough, and I need the other to fulfill something in me rather than I'm already perfect. And it's kind of the cherry on the cake, my other relationships, however important they might be, how much I might love them. So this kind of working on this, what is it about me that I'm not kind of accepting and loving myself so much that I need this additional validation, which is very understandable, but it's, a huge topic, I would say.
Yeah.
And I know from my personal experience that, it's tough.
Yeah. Yes. I just want to like stress or like underline that for me, using radical honesty tools has been super helpful in terms of self-love and self-acceptance. Like I've come such a long way in that, and I think I like that what you said, Tuulia, that it's like the crucial part of the codependency. And I'm still not fully free from codependency, but definitely loving myself more has helped. Yeah, and owning my shit and being witnessed and being honest and then being received and hearing other people be honest with me, that certainly, yeah, helped a lot.
Nice. Yeah, I really I feel very warm, like feel talking about self-love and this topic. Yeah, it's really nice. And yeah, I agree when you started saying this, like a lot of things to dive in deeper. And that kind of brings me to a bit of the closing of this webinar to say that it's just like the introduction to a lot of tools, to a lot of things that we can work on our personal level, whether it's like the beliefs we have about boundaries, whether we are intimate with somebody, and then it becomes a lot harder, whether we are in work situations and there's power dynamics and stuff. So I imagine like we have a lot of work to do on our own, and we can get some help with going to some trainings, to being coached and stuff like that. And yeah, I want to thank you a lot, Kasia and Tuulia, for speaking about all of that, boundaries. I think I want to start with a little recap of like, yeah, what is maybe most important for me to remember out of the discussion. I believe the side of like really taking time, pausing, checking in, what's happening with myself, feeling in the body. I believe that this was one of the key messages that I take out of this discussion. And then there comes the expressing part. And I believe like you show a really great example, like I want to, I don't want to, eventually making a request. And eventually, instead of like making requests very often with people we're closer with, maybe like going for agreements and stuff like that. And then we also had some talks about like maybe the difference between the physical, the verbal boundaries, consent, and when we need to use it. And there was also like maybe where we could dive a lot more, like what is the need behind the boundary and the aspect of self-love. Like I believe on this area, there's a lot more to dive into. And yeah, I shared in the chat also like some information so that all of you who are watching this, you can contact Kasia and Tuulia. I've been in both Kasia's and Tuulia spaces as participants, and I really find it amazing for me. Like I had so many beliefs, so many yeah, like old ways of dealing with boundaries, mostly assuming people boundaries and being really scared of that, or if I decide to not assume them, then going full in and often like crossing people boundaries and like having hard time really dealing with that. So I really want to encourage every one of you who are like interested to discover more about yourself, to just go into those spaces. I think I gained a lot more like also ability to just express myself and say clear no, clear yes, and also hear other people saying that without judging myself. Like it's about them, it's not about me, and then I can respect that, or I can say like I disagree somehow with like your want, and then find out how to deal with that. And yeah, it's been sometimes very challenging and also very helpful. And I would like to leave some time for you, Tuulia and Kasia, maybe like an extra 6-7 minutes to maybe speak about like how can people connect with you, find out more about what you're offering. So I leave the floor to you.
I'm
Yeah,
very busy.
as we were planning this webinar, then Kasia came up with this great idea that why don't we dive more into this topic of boundaries and recognizing how is it that I don't communicate, or I do communicate too harshly, or there's something, or I don't respect, or I am overly careful, and well, all this stuff. And actually, tutorial, if you're able to share screen, you could even show it. So we have this 4-week course coming up that the two of us are leading online, really working on boundaries. What do you What do you want to say about it, Kasha?
Yeah,
About our great
actually,
cause.
I'm super happy that we were able to create it in relatively short time. And yes, the call that I had with you and Tutor, I just feel so inspired talking about boundaries. So I am personally excited to dive deeper with people. Well, we haven't talked much about like how, like you mentioned, the use of anger. But I think there's much more to dive into, like with using anger as a tool to like recognize your boundaries and express them. And this part about like owning your boundaries. So wait, are you sharing? Yes, you are sharing this. Why is it black? Okay, yeah. Okay. Thank you, teacher. Yeah, so also owning our boundaries, like expressing the boundary versus setting the boundary. Like, how can I still, what I spoke about, how can I still hold my power even if someone disrespects my wishes? That is very inspiring to me to talk about. And yeah, the way we've worked before together, Tuulia. So we enjoy each other's company. And also, I think we're a good team for like providing very experiential spaces where like Tuulia is great in like welcoming everything. Like I still remember from my first workshops, like how many times she said, and that is welcome here. And you don't need to be any different than you are. So I also want to say it's this kind of space. So when you face your challenges about your boundaries, you might be in a very vulnerable place. And I definitely think like we can create a safe, like encouraging container to be vulnerable. So you're very much invited.
It's great, and I like the format we created. So it's basically every Wednesday we meet for 2.5 hours. We have a break in the middle. So there is a lot of conversation, exercises, reflections, different thematics each week. And then there is a buddy group. So you partner up with a few other people from the course and you meet up. We give you exercises to try out and sharings, and then some homeworks. So it's kind of a full package of really using a month to explore this topic, and diary, keeping diary as well if you wish. So yeah, that format of doing it every week plus then a buddy group, I like it. So you really get into the practice and reflecting and sharing and looking into your patterns and behaviors and what you learned early on. How is it not easy for you to say no, or how is it not easy for you to ask for what you want, or how is it not so easy for you to respect and be okay when the other one says no? So all this stuff.
Nice. And I'm going to send every one of you like a follow-up email. So you're going to receive like the link to sign up to like this 4-week online course. And maybe also it's worth mentioning to experience something that is not online, but with a group. There's also in the message in the chat the invitation to the 8-day intensive in La Palma in Spain. It's exactly the same training that I've been joining with you, Tuulia, last year, so I can only recommend it. It's a really amazing way to practice all that. Yeah. I imagine that's it for me. So I wish every one of you a great evening. I hope you enjoy this, and you will hear more from me in the following days with like emails. And of course, if you have any question, any feedback, or you want to dive deeper into it, then you can join, of course, the online course. But you can also come to us via emails. You're very invited to do that. That's it.
Thank you, Tutor, for putting it together and for facilitating this call. I felt very relaxed having you in charged. Thank you.
Thank you, Kasha.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for me too. And I'm also happy to tell that Tutur and me and somebody else are back 5th of November. So the next webinar next month.
Amazing.
Topic we don't know yet, but we'll let you know. Or Tutur will let you know.
There was a question whether the recording will be shared. It will be, right?
Yes. It will be shared, yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, time to say goodbye. Goodbye, everyone. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for joining. Bye-bye.